Lotus Jewel Creations presents an in-studio look at the creation process of a custom-made decorative name wall plaque. This beautiful custom-made decorative name plaque is made of solid wood and embellished with genuine Swarovski crystals. It is also accented with this cute, adorable pink ribbon and bow. To begin, this solid wood preformed plaque was lightly sprayed with several coats of Krylon Color Master spray paint in white. It was done outside for ventilation, and each light coat fully covered the surface and edges of the plaque, and it was in 20-minute intervals. That also included the back of the plaque. These beautiful solid wood preformed letters were then prepared for spraying as well. Any stickers and labels were removed from the manufacturer, as well as a flathead pliers were taken in order to remove any staples. Using an open cardboard box, I laid out the letters with enough space in between to begin spraying. Using the Krylon paint, once again, I did several light coats, about 20-minute intervals, making sure I get around all edges of each letter, not just the top surface. 400 grit and 600 grit sandpaper was then used after the wood pieces were fully dried in order to smooth out the edges and refine the surfaces. 400 grit was used for the edges, and the 600 grit, which is an ultrafine, was used for the surfaces. After, 70% isopropyl alcohol and a cloth was used to clean up any debris or residue. Using a non-stick craft mat on my work surface, I began to prepare the paint using this Craftsmart multi-surface premium satin acrylic paint in Pink Bliss. Using a paper plate with my paint palette, I began by squirting a dollop of Pink Bliss paint onto the paper plate. Using a 1/2-inch flat paintbrush, I began by dipping my paintbrush in, laid out my letters with enough distance between, and started with the edges and inner parts. Then, using a cross-hatching pattern, I began with light strokes. One coat included a vertical, horizontal, and a vertical paint pattern with the Pink Bliss paint. I continued this with each letter, sanding in between each coat with the 600 ultrafine grit paper. Once again, also using the 70% isopropyl alcohol and a clean cloth, the edges were cleaned up, not only for the letters in between each coat and sanding, but also preparing the plaque for painting. A test run was made with the layout of the letters to see exactly how they would fit onto the plaque, and then the plaque was started. Each edge was sanded in first, the 400 grit. Using the flat paintbrush once again and the Pink Bliss paint, the edges of the plaque were painted with long, smooth strokes. Each layer of paint was also sanded with the 600 grit ultrafine sandpaper and cleaned with the isopropyl alcohol. It took approximately 4 layers, not only for the plaque, but for the letters as well. Once all the letters and plaque were coated in 5 coats of paint with a final sanding and cleanup of alcohol, they were placed for positioning back onto the plaque, and with the aid of a ruler and mechanical pencil, the edges were marked out to make sure both the starting letter at the front, the ending letter at the back, the top and bottoms and in between were equally spaced out. Light dots were made onto the plaque, marking the edges of each letter. Then, using the 400 grit sandpaper, the backs were roughened up with the sandpaper for some tooth. Then, using E6000 glue, a healthy thick layer was placed on the back of each letter, and then they were pressed firmly into or onto the plaque. Afterwards, using the isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, any squished glue that came out of the edges were cleaned up. Once that was done, the plaque and letters were left to dry for at least 24 hours, and then the Krylon matte finish was used to spray the plaque to make sure that the paint was sealed with a protective coating. While the Krylon matte finish clear coat was drying, the ribbon was prepared for the plaque. About 2.5 feet was cut at a 45-degree angle and then sealed with a lighter. It just took about a second in the flame to seal the edge. Then grommets were made. Holes were made for grommets about a 1/2 inch into the edge of each ribbon using the smallest hole in the crocodile tool. Then the grommets were used to be fastened with the crocodile tool. Next, a needle and thread was used to create the bow. The bow took about 1.5 foot. A crisscross pattern was made, and a stitch was made to seal the joints. Then another piece of ribbon that was sealed also with the lighter was stitched over the stitching, with the stitching secured in the back. The edges of this ribbon were also trimmed and cut at an angle of 45 degrees and sealed with the lighter. Once the plaque was dried, it was time for the Swarovski crystals. Using 4mm flat backs in clear Xeris finish, the crystals were placed in position of the letters on the plaque. Once the spacing was determined, the mechanical pencil was then used once again to create light dots to represent each crystal's placement. Using E6000 paint and an awl, a foam square, and a Q-tip, the foam square was used to cover the tip of the awl in order to grip each crystal's surface, and the Q-tip was dipped into a dollop of the E6000 in order to apply it to the flat back of each crystal, and then it was carefully positioned over the marked pencil dot on each letter until all the letters were placed with their varied amount of crystals. Once the Swarovski crystals were left to dry for a minimum of 24 hours, it was time to adhere the pink accent ribbon to the back of the plaque. This was first done by marking off a center point on either edge of the plaque, using the arch of the plaque as the center. Then, making sure that the nail I was using, which came from a set of picture hooks, was appropriate, that the head was wider than the grommet hole for security, and that the length of the nail was definitely shorter than the depth of the wood plaque. Using my double-sided mallet, one side is rubber, the one is a hard acrylic, I use the hard acrylic side to pound the nail into both measured marks of the plaque. Upon doing so, in a test run, I found that it was not secure enough to hold the plaque flat, so I decided to add a second grommet hole using my ruler to measure 2 inches apart, and my crocodile once again to punch a second hole into each side of the ribbon. Then using the grommet part of the crocodile, I secured a second set of grommets onto each side of the ribbon. And using my mallet once again, I pound the nails into the second set of grommet holes. Once that was secured, I did a test run and I found that it worked perfectly. In addition, during this process, I made sure I placed a soft cloth and foam padding underneath the front where the Swarovski crystals were of the plaque, so that the friction, movement, and pressure of pounding the nails into the plaque did not damage any of the crystals. Now, the plaque would actually be hung using a loop that I sewed onto the ribbon. So the ribbon that's attached to the plaque would be the main back, and the bow that I sewed would be attached to the ribbon. Marking off the center of the ribbon, I pinched about an inch in, and using my needle and thread, I attached the back of the bow and stitched it to the front of the ribbon, leaving an inch for a loop. Then the back was finished off with my seal and signature. To hang the plaque, you can either use hardware such as an anchor and screw, or a picture hook, or even command strips. I chose a picture hook. I chose my spot, measured out the location, and hammered in the picture hook, and then, using the loop of the bow, hung the plaque on the wall. Here is the finished product. Thank you for joining Lotus Jewel Creations today with an in-studio look at the creation of a decorative name wall plaque made with genuine Swarovski crystals and solid wood and embellished with a pink accent ribbon. You can find more of Lotus Jewel Creations on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Etsy shop at www.etsy.com/shop/Lotus Jewel Creations. Thank you for joining me today. Please like and subscribe.